So we've temporarily lost Liam because Analog are just having a couple of sound issues. So if you suddenly hear a blast of music, that's what it is. But he'll be pottering back in. So now we've got the second panel, which is Julie McNamara from Vital Exposure, talking about the knitting circle, and then Keith Palmer from the Comedy School, London. So I think we'll run the papers back to back, and then we've got about half an hour for questions, then a bit of a break, and then Analog. Sounds good.
I love the way you said with great confidence, we'll run the papers back to back.
Do you want the lights off?
Oh yeah, turn the lights off. You don't have to look at me. I would like to say in advance, I apologise, I can't stay this evening. I'd love to have come to the pub because I know it's going to be more exciting at the Rusty Nail. It's like all of those off the agenda activities are always the best parts of networking and feasting around information from each other. So I'm so sorry, I've got to go back to London to make mischief on stage. So off I go. I just feel so fired up from this morning's conversations and contributions, you know. And it's true to say the lunatics have truly taken over the asylum, now I'm here. So I'm just going to talk a bit about how I began making theatre and where I'm at now, really. And theatre is never something you do all by yourself, is it? Although I did for a while because, well, we'll come back to that in a minute. I'm going to talk about my political activism because I think it's significant. Because as a mental health system user, I have engaged with the services very often against my will. And given that that's the case, there are aspects of theatre that you have no control over, like being dragged kicking and screaming in ankle restraints and handcuffs by the police, which is high drama really, and I don't think it's very good for your health, is that? I first engaged with the mental health system when I was about 19 years of age. And I can't remember why, but clearly I must have been behaving oddly or somehow out of order. But when I look back, our whole family was out of order. They came from Ireland, settled in Liverpool. My father's Catholic, my mother's Protestant. Given the time that they connected, it was absolutely taboo to be seen to consort together on the same streets. You couldn't go to the same pub or you'd get a bullet in your head. So it was a fairly lively backdrop to be raised next to, shall we say. I think my father was a bit barking mad anyway, because he used to put pepper in our bottles.
Oh.
Apparently that's supposed to put hair on your chest.
Did he know you were a girl?
Good point. Very good point. And that was my first piece of work. I've decided to sit down. I don't know why I thought it was the Pope for a bit. Delusional behaviour again. I wrote a piece called Pigtails, which was semi-autobiographical. And there's like life before those particular sections that I got involved with in the mental health system, and life afterwards. Pigtails was a piece I wrote almost 10 years ago now, when I kind of returned to theatre, if you like. In the early years, I was told I was too sensitive for theatre. That was a shrink, by the way, in Nottingham. I blame you.
Yeah.
And
I probably know.
you probably do, actually. You probably are. We won't. He's not here to defend himself. And actually, there's a woman beside her who needed to know better. And she's not here either. Let's not go there. I was advised to do something more therapeutic. And so they found 2 drama therapy courses for me to pursue. So I came down to London, first of all to the Sesame course, which was a training in drama therapy. Not psychodrama, distinct from psychodrama. Drama therapy, I feel at that time, I don't know where it's gone now because I've completely opted out because I thought it was too arty-farty nonsense and not particularly connected to people's real lives. Not psychodrama, where we're all kind of spilling out our emotions and dragging our spleen out in public spaces for people to porn over, really. Mad porn, I call it. Misery lit, I guess it gets packaged as, doesn't it? But I did decide that I would train as a drama therapist if it got me out of that psychiatric space more swiftly, which it did. So I towed the line. And part of my training, I went to St Albans for 2.5 years training. You had to be in group therapy, individual therapy, some kind of analysis 3 times a week, and you had to learn for 2 years solid the ins and outs of the teachings around psychiatry and psychology, which was great because I learned the tools from the master's house, and I thought nobody will ever do that to me again without my knowledge. I don't practice as a drama therapist. It doesn't suit me, and I'm sorry if you're all drama therapists or have been in the past. You know, whatever works for you, really. But it didn't suit me. All of my work is around social justice. The reason I wrote the first piece of work I wrote was because I was disturbed by the way some of my friends and myself had been perceived through the lens of the mental health system in this country. So I wanted to write about that. And there was a commission going round in London around the disability arts world. Now, I found a home in the disability arts world, really. Very lively movement, cutting edge, street theatre. I mean, those visions of people dragging themselves out of wheelchairs, spattering red blood outside number 10 Downing Street will stay with me for a long while. That's theatre. And of course there were all sorts of infights politically around who should be in the disability arts movement and who's out, you know, who was born disabled, who's acquired disability. And if we perceive disability within a social model, then it's attitudes and stupid environments and peculiar planning by strange designers that can't leave steps away. You've always got to have steps that actually leave people out. One of the most sensible pieces of research I've ever done, if you like research, was done by a woman who had given birth to twins 9 months earlier. And she wrote this brilliant study about inclusion, and it was just called Tackling Hackney with a Double Buggy. And you know, it said it all. It was like, who's in and who's out in these public spaces? Anyway, I was looking at gender, so I went for this commission through a disability festival called Exposure, which is why I decided to call, eventually, the theatre company I set up last year, Vital Exposure, as a nod to that original commission. So here's me returning to theatre, wanted to look at gender. I'd been raised by my father as his boy child for the first few years of my life, largely because I think he was slightly disconnected from reality that we might all share. If we can all agree we're at Exeter University today in one of their drama studios, if we're all agreed that, then I think we're sharing a similar reality, if not the same. My father decided I was a boy child because he came in too late when I'd been born, and the umbilical cord was there rather healthily, still attached to me, but between my legs. And he threw the midwife out of the house because she cut the umbilical cord. Dismembering my son! Killing my child! What the hell you done in this house? And that's where it began. So I decided to revisit that moment, and I wrote Pigtails about a female child raised as a boy and what happens to that child in this country set against the mental health services. And so I'm going to show you the last 10 years of my work from that. It's all right, by the way, I'm over it. It was only an umbilical cord. Slideshow. Why did it just open to go like that? So this first piece, that's me, by the way. It was on a very limited budget. I decided I'll get the director, I'll write the piece, I'll produce it, and I'll play all the parts. So I played apart from the priest, who you will see in the next slide, but I did play 6 roles, swift changes. It was a very tolerable piece of theatre, and I wrote it at the right time, whilst they were looking at policy development in mental health services around gender. And you see there's me again, playing Psychic Seeley. I'm not playing the priest, but I've never seen that actor again. I think he got distressed because of the part he had to play. That's Dominic Davis, lovely man. Well, he was, who knows where he is. Pigtails was taken to New Zealand by the Mental Health Foundation and was then recognised by the Mental Health Commission, fed into policy development there, was brought back by Dr. Bernie Delord to Cornwall, to the South West Trust, where it's informed policy inside the mental health system on how we view gender. The next commission was for Theatre Workshop in Edinburgh, again looking at gender, but this time I was really playing with people. And I started off playing Pig This was in Pig's Sister, the sequel. And it was about two embittered old queens who were part and parcel of the same brain, basically. Two lives, the animus and anima in the same person. Snow White and the Seven Whores was one of the fantasies of Pig's Sister. And what was lovely about this was I assembled all of the queer activists, the mental health service users and the disabled artists around London at the time. It's a great international partnership with Ada Healin from Turkey. So that last piece, Snow White and the Seven Whores, was a fantasy bubble. I worked with film and theatre and worked with people who had lived in those spaces, in the care systems, in psychiatric institutions, special schools for disabled people. And the collective of artists on that Snow White and the Seven Whores, just down there, I think it's slide number 4. Ada Healin from Turkey, Michael Achtman from Montreal, Claire Ryan, who is the woman with big red hair at the back, created a fantastic project in New Zealand connecting sex workers with people with learning disabilities who kept falling foul of the criminal justice system. I don't believe you, Sam. Philip Paxton with the very red wig down in a collapsed state, bottom right, who runs Diversity Works in Auckland. Liz Carr down the bottom in the purple boa, who is a sit-up stand-up comedian who won she came third in Funny Women 2 years ago and won her semi-final quarter in Hackney Empire. Fantastic comedian. Actually all of them comedians, and that will come to comedy in a bit. Trish Sweeney from Dublin and Cristina Perezzani from a theatre company out in Italy. Since that particular piece of work, we have all worked together in various different collaborations in shapes and forms. So, Pig's Sister was recast, and thank you again. I know you're just doing it for attention now, aren't you? I used to go mad for attention. Pig's Sister was repackaged. We took it to New Zealand. It went back to Dada Festival, the Deaf and Disability Arts Festival in Liverpool, which is a really exciting event that happens once a year. And it's full of deaf and disabled artists touting their wares, strutting their stuff on stage and screen, and workshops and masterclasses and anything you want to name. Fantastic visual arts exhibition as well, with beautiful collaborations with the Tate Gallery, with FACT, which is the Film and Cinematic Technology Centre in Liverpool. We've had the Disability Film Festival there, and so on and so forth. Why am I telling you this? Oh, because Pigtails then went back to New Zealand, and I was asked to perform an excerpt. This was in 2004, and they wanted an excerpt to be performed that they could film through Kiwi TV, I think it was Cream Television, an excerpt in Kingseat, which was a former asylum, huge big bin, must have been about 1,500 bed unit that was built outside Auckland, which they have turned into a kids' theme park called Spookers. You have to be 16 years or over, but once you have paid your $15, you can go in and you can experience life on the asylum. You can experience life in a straitjacket for up to 2 minutes and no more. There are health and safety reasons why not. You can also go into a room where they will reproduce the psychotic experience with you and for you. You will be alerted at all time and accompanied by 2 warders throughout your experience. You can also enter a soft room where you will experience 4-point restraint should you so wish. The one thing you don't recreate, I mean I can't believe this, but anyway, obviously you can't recreate the experience of being beaten up on the ward. Which did happen from time to time. I did the film, and I took the crew around the grounds because it was one of those, I mean, really large, sort of little village feel, old asylum. You know what they're like, big bin. And we cruised up with the film crew, this long, beautiful driveway with this wonderful kind of tropical vegetation. We're, you know, just outside Auckland. It was like Peyton Place. Do you remember that? There used to be a series on telly. We were going to Peyton Place. And we went straight the way up there, and I just felt this is very familiar. Even the kind of plan of the grounds, the layout of the buildings, where you find the IT unit, where you're going to find the ECT unit, where you know the silent graves are. where you know the slave labour happens within these grounds. I could feel it. So I said to the film crew, can we slow down as we go past this area here? I said, is this what they're saying is the farmlands? They said, yeah. I said, these will be the graves. They went, there's no graves here. I said, well, we'll see. So they carried on filming the whole thing, and they're talking me through this documentary where they want me to do pigtails in a minute. And I'm going to do pigtails for them. Anyway, we get through to the administration block, and we talk to this guy who's set up spookers. And I said, do you think it might be offensive to some people that you've set up this theme park here in parts of this building where people have been through great pain? And, you know, if it was set up for therapy, therapy comes from the Greek word therapia, meaning to heal. Do you think it's a healing experience for people coming in to kind of live with that superficial kind of glee experience of what it must have been like to be a nutter in here? Like some kind of joyride experience? Anyway, he was very sober when I asked the questions and could see that I was quite distressed by the whole idea of it. We went into various parts of the hospital where I was able to show the film crew. This would have been the IT unit, industrial therapy or industrial treatment, whatever they called it, attached to local industry. And they said, no, we didn't have that here in New Zealand. Probably happened in the UK, but not here in New Zealand. So I said, okay, we'll see. And we carried on round the hospital with that kind of feel. So I talked to the administrator who was there showing us round, and he got out an old map. And he said, oh, this used to be the cemetery on the edge of the farmland that we'd passed. And I said, oh, I thought that might be so. And what were the local industries here? He said, oh, well, that would be the furniture place out in so-and-so that now serves Auckland. And I said, and what were people paid? Well, they would have been paid a fairly healthy wage. I think it was $13 a week. Okay. That'd be about £6.50. That's 2 pints of beer if you're lucky, you know what I mean? So some of my theatre and film work has been addressing what we do with the stories we are carrying with us. Whose story is it, and whose voice is retelling it? And I sit in a very strange space because I've been inside the system and out. I think I was the first mental health coordinator in this country to be sectioned by the police. Not a glamorous position to be in, let me tell you, but it did provide me with some comedy. Because there's nothing, you've got to laugh at yourself, do you know what I mean? You've gone apeshit with somebody in a garden. The police are called. 6 police vehicles come to hone one woman down. In ankle restraints and handcuffs, it was the Hornsey police team. And it was only 6 months after Joy Gardner had been killed. So it was in my mind, just keep quiet. And I'm on my belly in the back of a van. And I'm really glad they haven't taped up my mouth, because it's really hard to breathe when you're thrown head first into piss in the back of a police van. And then they take me to be sectioned on a lock-in ward, and I looked up and I said, you do realise what you're doing is completely illegal, and you can't do this under the Mental Health Act 1983. You've improperly applied a 136 section. And of course they looked a bit freaked out, and they went, how do you know so much about the Mental Health Act? And I went, well, I'm Mental Health Coordinator for Hackney. And they went, of course you are. I know, it's daft, isn't it? But I am. So I gave them my name, and they called somebody immediately who could confirm what I looked like and who I was, and yes, I was Mental Health Coordinator for Hackney. They had to release me. I wasn't sectionable. I had been very angry. I was really pissed off. I discovered a shrink was abusing one of his clients. I think it'd upset anybody here. Wouldn't you? But I wouldn't suggest that viewers do this at home, because I hit him, and it doesn't work. I learnt the hard way. So you do. Anyway, I write about it all. This piece of work was a commission from Australia. After my work in Auckland, Philip Paxton spotted me out there. This is the guy in the wheelchair who's playing Joan in this piece. I'm Darby on the right. And you see those stunning good looks. It's in the family. And that lovely beehive, which I'm trying to decide whether to wear tomorrow or not. Because I'm on stage tomorrow at the Liberty Festival. Just plugging that if you're in London. Darby and Joan was a piece about two codependent, bitter patients in the same care unit. And we had a field day. It's pure comedy and pure drag. Whenever I put a frock on, I look like a man in drag. But I guess it's kind of lived with me. I'm a kind of masculine woman. Brought up as a boy for the first 3 years. I believed I was a boy. And do you know what? They had a better time of it. I'm living proof. And so whenever I put a frock on, I don't quite look right, if you ask me. Anyway, that's me looking very like Lily Savage, if you ask me. Embittered twin of. There they are, 2 bookends of bitterness. Big Sister, when I stepped out of that, I had great fun casting the 2 women. I cast 2 men in the roles. And Pig and Sissy had a field day, played by Michael McNamara, my cousin, who'd been in care as a child, and so knew the story inside out. And the other character played by Anthony Hitch. They did a brilliant job. After my work with Pig Sister and Darby and Joan, this young woman with a learning disability called Rachel High approached me when I was at a conference in Melbourne in Australia, and she said, "Would you mentor me?" And I was really touched, but I was also really patronising. And I said, "That's a lovely idea, but I live a long, long way away." And she went, "Oh no, I was born in Middlesex." And I went, "Oh." She said, "I will get my director to get money, and you will come and work with me here." And I went, "Oh." And she bloody well did. So from 2006 to 2008, I went to Australia 3 times to work with Rachel Hyde. We developed an extraordinary way of working together through workshops so that I could understand how she remembers a story and how she processes a script with a lot of rhythm and repetition, but her own style of storytelling. And she led the way. I will never forget, actually, there's still one question I cannot answer that Rachel has given me, and it's going to be a life question, really. We're rushing to go back to a studio date with a new director, and I'm getting a bit fidgety because Rachel has a way, straight after she's eaten, she just wants to window shop. And I was getting a bit antsy, and I said, "Do you think we could move a bit faster, Rach? Can we go to the studio, because we've got to be there?" And when Rachel feels stubborn, she will just stop dead in her tracks and then start rocking on her feet. So she starts rocking on her feet, she looks at me and she says, "I'm doing the best I can." And I go, "But I don't think you are. I think you're being stubborn. There's a difference between doing the best you can and being stubborn." And she went, "Julie, what's wrong with slow?" And I still can't answer that question. Through the process of my learning with Rachel High, and we wrote the piece together very much out of those improvised workshops, Rachel wanted to tell her story, but through that process of work together, I discovered extraordinary things about how Rachel put a script together and remembers a story. Now, this is a woman who'd spent most of her earlier life in a special school, and then her mother, who's a great activist out there in Australia, ensured that she went to a mainstream school, was taught to read and write. I mean, she's brilliant at reading and writing, and way ahead of me in some aspects, really quirky aspects of knowledge and information. She can tell you every single cloud that's ever been discovered scientifically. I couldn't tell you what they're all about. There's clouds, you know. And it's about what she's passionate about, you know. So one day, Rachel, who loves playing, what do you call it? Noughts and crosses. It's just called noughts and crosses, isn't it? Oh, that'll do. What do you call it?
North American.
Tic-tac-toe. Tic-tac-toe, I like that. It's even better. Yeah, that sounds like some kind of medication gone wrong. I'd said to her, "Please don't just do noughts and crosses. You have to be seen to be writing a letter in this little piece of theatre here. And I think it won't print if the audience can see you're playing tic-tac-toe or noughts and crosses. And we can see what you're doing." So she said, "Yes, okay, fine." So the next day I see her scribbling again, and I thought, she's not writing a letter, that's not the format. So I got antsy again, and I went, "Are you playing noughts and crosses?" And she said, "No. Actually, I'm writing out Maggie Smith's speech from Clash of the Titans." And so I said, "Oh." That was huge learning for me, that actually somebody could remember by rote a huge piece of a monologue like that and make it work. And what a wake-up call. This is a piece called Crossings, directed by Paulette Randall. Paulette's been a huge boon working alongside me. Crossings was about Liverpool. The city of Liverpool is built on slavery. And it was about the institution of racism, about sexual slavery, and about how your identity is distorted through migration and how you reconstruct yourself in new spaces. So we brought together, it was like a modern day Scrooge, the story of Shelley on the left, who is a young mixed race kid who's pregnant and trying to get out of a gang, meets 3 ghosts on an old galleon. Actually, it was a Liverpool ferry boat, but it changes into a galleon, you see, and it's the old slave ship, the Zong. And those 3 old wizened characters give us sort of tests and challenges for her character. The piece was blessed by the Ngāpuhi, the iwi just north of Auckland in New Zealand, because I sent the script. I wanted to use the eyes of First Woman, which was a portrait done by Maori artist Lisa Riahana. And I just love the fact that they read the script and the elders blessed it and sent us off on this journey. This last piece is the knitting circle that I really want you to come and see. So I'm just whetting your appetites and then leaving you with it. The knitting circle was written from the stories of survivors of the asylums in the Hertfordshire cluster. There are 6 big bins, big Victorian asylums, 2,000 bed units in the Hertfordshire area. So roughly about 12,000 people in the overspill from London. And we've used film from inside the spaces that we've got back into. Harperbury Hospital was essentially the story I was writing from, because I lived there for 2 years and worked there for 2 years. And I found an old tape in the basement, listened to those voices and thought, what's happened to those people? I want to go back and find out where they are now. And also, I felt like we'd betrayed thousands of people. There were so many stories of people in there, and I thought, what are you doing in here? Raymond, who was born in the asylum, who lived there all of his life, well, he's earning a wage, he's a porter, isn't he? He's having a laugh, he loves it. The knitting circle was absolutely packed out when we did Soho Theatre in February. That was the first stage. And it's completely based on the stories of people who came forward. I put word out in the mental health system survivor movement, and I'm known as a vociferous spokesperson from that area of life. So I guess there's a little more trust when people come forward and go, please tell my story, this is what I want to gift you, you know. I was inundated, I just got flooded. But some of the stories that touched me most were stories of staff who'd been so abused by the system. There was a member of staff from Harperbury Hospital who I was scared of. I was really scared of him. He was a bit of an emotional bully, but I could see he was distorted by the system himself. And I was so shocked when I heard he'd been found hanged in the nursing quarters. Hetty May Bailey on the left is a sign language interpreter who's worked among the deaf communities for many, many years, 25 years in the West End. Herself is a disabled person, and she's at the core of the show. Mandy Simmons on the right, again a disabled actor who has been working in the West End. All of these people came forward and said, we want to be involved. Alan Clifton, who's playing Raymond in the piece, is a guy with a learning disability who I've known for over 20 years, who has lived in a community for people with brain damage. I didn't know he was passionate about theatre. He didn't know either, because nobody had ever suggested it. And one day he came round my flat and he said, what are you packing that band for? And I said, my stage manager let me down. He said, what's a stage? And we started talking, and I said, come with me. So he came. I trained him up as an usher first of all. His favourite thing was, shh, turn off your mobile phones, please. People go, I haven't got a mobile phone. I don't care, turn it off. Alan, be a bit more gentle with people. We want them to stay and see the show. Caroline Parker, who's the deaf actor I was talking about earlier on, who does signed song, very elaborate theatre stuff, again at the heart of the piece. She's based on 2 people I worked with in Harperbury. A woman called Marula, who'd had a baby, and the only reason she was there, she was told she'd brought shame on the family, and she was found with a letter at the gates and handed in when she was about 14 years of age. She did a long, long time in Harperbury. And also on a young man called Robert, who we discovered came from Canada, but we learnt the hard way. Robert was always told off for flapping his hands around. He was a deaf guy, but we couldn't understand his sign language, and the only language we used was the 50 basic signs in Makaton, based on Margaret Ken and Tony's discoveries. Very simplified, kind of telegram experience of sign language interpretation. So nobody understood that actually, if this guy comes from Canada, he's using ASL. American Sign Language only uses one hand. Same as Ireland, one hand in the Republic. You need your other hand for your Guinness. Sensible. That's my story so far. Any questions before I'm allowed off? Ooh. Just one little thing I would want to say. We had 2 shows every year. There was the pantomime and there was the Easter Bonnet Parade. And they were both around Christian festivals, of course. So if you were Muslim, you know, you're literally bullied into it. It was usually done for the local Masonic Lodge. The Freemasons had the stranglehold both in the Essex cluster and the Hertfordshire cluster. Nothing went on in those hospitals. The whole culture was created by the Freemason stranglehold. And to this day, they still have a hell of a lot of power in the Essex cluster, in the nursing services. And I'll stake my life on that. If you weren't a member of the lodge, it was very hard as a member of staff to be allowed into the networking system within the mental health services, particularly inside the asylum spaces. You know, like things like membership of the staff club, where all the staff hung out after hours. You were treated like a social leper if you weren't a Mason or somehow attached. It's a very bizarre piece of information. Those 2 shows that were rolled out, we used to have the League of Friends came every Christmas to give everybody cigarettes. You weren't allowed soap, you weren't allowed underwear, you weren't allowed any personal effects basically. We did go out on holidays. I remember creating, I thought I was great actually, because in my training as a drama therapist, I lived and worked at Harperbury for 2 years. And during that time, I would try and create things that I thought would ease people's move out into the community. I was only young, I was delusional and naively hopeful. And I thought, if I just book a coach and we go and see cats, wouldn't that be great for everyone? It's a trip out. I don't know who was watching who in the audience really, because we were all acting up, all of us, and I couldn't stop counting heads. And sadly, a patient did go missing that night, and she found her way to Nurse Jennings' house. And I don't know how the hell she found her way to Nurse Jennings' house, which apparently she'd only visited once. But she was all right. They gave her a cup of tea till the police came. There were things I tried at the time. I look back and I think what a screwed up idea of trying to encourage people to take power. This play, The Knitting Circle, is based on a group that I ran all those years ago. I was helped by a brilliant member of staff inside who said, "You will never get away with this unless you're seen to be doing something for the hospital shop." So I said, well, no, nobody buys anything in the hospital shop. Doesn't matter. At least we can write down. And I said, well, what shall I do? They said, well, what do you really want to do? I said, I'm running a women's group for women who had babies and they've been ripped out of their lives and put in here. And they don't even know the name of the person in the next bed. And I just think they should talk to each other. Wouldn't that be great? Naive. She said, I think you should run a knitting circle. That'd go down well. So I said, well, I can't knit. Doesn't matter. We'll get Nan Sweeney released off Ward 7. Ward 7 was for the really naughty girls. You'd be scared of reading their notes. But most people's notes were lost anyway. I don't know why I'm waffling on. I'm hoping for questions. I'm not getting any.
Maybe we could, if we move straight on to Keith, and then we'll have a good half an hour for discussion. So then we can, if that's okay.
dear. I'll go now. Place to tell their story. So on it goes. There's a project called Out of Sight, Out of Mind, which is an online project. And they're gathering testimony, photographs, visual imagery, moving image, anything from the Hertfordshire cluster. And I think there are other projects like that, like the Wilford suitcases.
There's also Health Talk Online.
Sorry?
Health Talk Online has narratives of service users with different conditions, including mental health conditions.
Okay.
And I
I
think
think
there's a huge one as well. Youth Health Talk Online as well.
Brilliant.
It's a huge archive actually, and a lot of people make use of it
It
for
used to be called
secondary.
DIPEX. It's from Oxford
research.
University.
Yeah, that's
What's
right,
it called
Dipex.
now?
It's called Health Talk Online, and I think the other one is Youth Talk Online, or Youth Health Talk Online.
Yeah, my only issue with the Out of Sight, Out of Mind is there aren't enough survivors of the system telling their story. Well, actually that's not fair. The survivors who were telling their story were members of staff, you know, and I think they were equally bruised by the experiences of living in those bins.
A lot of people are doing their stories now online though, with mental health weblogs. You know,
Yeah.
people just going around the services, they're doing their own webblogging amongst themselves.
Yeah.
And that's
Reed
interesting.
set up one for siblings actually. Which,
Oh,
which
brilliant.
I love, yeah.
What's that called?
I have to send it to you. I don't know the address off the top of my head, to be honest. But
Can I give you
it's-
my
it'll-
email address?
Yeah, sure, yeah. I mean, it's going to be on the Rethink site anyway. It'll be off their main site somewhere.
On the which sign?
On
site?
the Rethink site.
Rethink.
So, yeah, rethink.org.
Not so much. I mean, it's largely historical.
I've still got a
But people-
vast amount of
people try and
photographs that
remotivate
people
it.
gave me,
We should
and
get back to a song.
I've discovered my line manager then is still alive, now in her early 80s, still believes that the asylum should never have been closed, and she's got 14 films that she took from the hospital. And also when I went back to what's now Harperbury, I discovered a guy still working there who was working there when I was young. And I remember him as a young 21-year-old skinny kid with loads of hair, and now he's a little fat man with bald head. Young reality check, you know what I mean? Meeting again. And he's got a whole storeroom stuffed full of photograph albums. And if ever I was questioning my own memory and my own experiences, I didn't need to anymore. It was a bit like CSI, because there were photographs of me from that time which I had no idea were in existence. And a bloody scoop from some local news rag, you know. And there I was. So that was quite funny. It was weird. But there's lots of evidence there. It's about who's going to collate this and how is it recorded, where is it retained as well, who has access to those records. Because the people in those photographs didn't know of their existence. The three people who used to live in, who I had a reconnection with a couple of weeks back, when they saw the albums, it was brilliant because they just came back to life again, you know.
When you go back further in time, you know, just thinking of, you know, the research I want to do for my PhD, I mean, if you get back to the sort of 18th century, I mean, there are no records of women in the asylums.
Well, do you know, to
of
be...
the private madhouses of that time, or very, very few,
Yeah.
you know, so inevitably there's a sort of imbalance just in the existing.
A lot of the records weren't available to us in the 80s. I
Yeah.
remember people who were coming into SEAC, they thought of us as cushy corner on the asylum because we were in these two great big prefab units and we were there to ease community care, people's lives back into the community. We were putting people in touch with relatives they'd never met, who'd never heard of them, didn't know they'd been put away, didn't know their existence. And we were placing people in strange spaces they'd never been in before. People who couldn't communicate around, navigate traffic or understand currency. We'd been through decimalisation, you know, and I was trying to persuade people, I used to play shop, trying to persuade people that these small brown coins were good. You know, and you could get a biscuit with that, and they'd be like, no, just give me the biscuit. I mean, how do you get your head around that?
Yeah.
You'd be like, well, I don't want the brown things. You have them if you like me so much. I'll just eat, thank you. And basics like going to choose in a cafe, and then I'd say, do you want carrots or peas? And suddenly realised, through what people were struggling with, that these were women who'd been fed gruel on a refractory ward, the back wards where people were literally let go. Women whose records were lost, didn't know what a carrot or a pea was because it arrived in a grey mush, came out of a moolie mixer. So it'd be like, well, where's my grey food gone? What's this nonsense? Green things rolling about on a plate. It was a huge learning curve.
Time for tea.
Yeah. Good timing.